All, please be seated. Are there any apologies, please?
There are three apologies: Councillor Gary Cowan, Councillor Peter Dennis, and Councillor Pauline Hellier-Simons.
Any more from the floor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Got apologies from John Coucil as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 109, the minutes of the previous meeting. Oh, sorry. Before I start, can I say, please note that the meeting is currently being webcast live. A reminder that members do need to stand when speaking in the chamber. May I remind everyone that I tend to adhere strictly to the timing set out in the constitution. I would like to remind members to be mindful to speak directly into their microphones. If members turn away from the microphone, the sound will not be picked up for people in front of you or online attendees. Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. May I sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of January as a correct record? Please may I have a show of hands? Pretty much unanimous. Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest? Andrew.
I'd like to declare an interest in item 114.1. I own a leasehold property which the freehold is owned by WBC.
Thank you. Item 112, we come on to public question times. I'd like to remind the executive members that responses to questions must be no longer than 2 minutes, and we are timing them. We have 3 public questions. Mr. Stevens, please, would you like to put your question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Residents are struggling to understand why the local plan update has still not been released, given that the public consultation on this proposal ended on the 24th of January 2022, over 2 years ago. It has more recently been timetabled by the Executive Member for Planning and Local Plan for publication in November 2023, yet we have still not seen it, nor do we have a new timetable for publication. When will we see the updated local plan update?
Thank you for your question. Excuse me. As you are aware, the government published proposed reforms to national planning policy in December 22 for consultation. Some of the proposals were on matters very important to our communities, especially the suggestion to allow passed over delivery of housing to be taken into account when preparing local plans. Our programme for the local plan, which proposed publication of the local plan in November, was based on when the government said it would confirm its national planning policy reforms. Unfortunately, the government missed its timetable several times, not confirming the changes in the spring or autumn of 23, but eventually in mid-December 23. Given the delay to publication of the expected national policy reforms, the alternative would have been to proceed without taking the changes into account. Our judgment, like many other local authorities, was to wait for the government. Now that the national policy reforms have been confirmed, officers are actively reflecting on them and progressing work which will lead to a recommendation to the council on the local plan. The formal programme will be updated through a future report to executive. However, I expect a report to be taken to council on the next stage of the local plan in the summer.
Do you have a supplementary?
You say you want to give everyone the chance to get involved in all aspects and stages of the planning process in your draft statement of community involvement. Yet whenever I come here and ask questions about the local plan, I seem to be given excuses. Are you really interested in getting people involved in the planning process?
Yes, and there will be that opportunity when it comes.
Thank you. Mr Humphreys, would you like to ask your question, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Copped Beach Park and Ride has been open for more than 2 months. I've passed it on at least 24 occasions and I'm yet to see a single user. That's great in respect of carbon net zero, but not so good for council finances. In fairness, my wife did see a car in there, but it was a remote control toy operated by a 6-year-old. I suspect he didn't pay for the parking fee. Clearly, the millions spent building the car park are lost, but I'd like to know the full operating loss to date, taking account of the budget income, actual income, if any, and running costs.
Thank you, Peter, for your question. Firstly, I wish to point out that on numerous occasions I've highlighted to the previous administration that a park and ride facility located at Copped Beach was a poor investment in funding. The business case was weak. It required the car park to be 90% full to break even, and only got through the benefit cost ratio scoring on potentially saving personal injury accidents between the park and ride and the town centre. Unfortunately, it went ahead, and this administration has now inherited this project. Park and ride sites have struggled since COVID nationally and locally, and Mere Oak, which was operating successfully before COVID, has gradually increased the usage to 60% of its pre-pandemic level. Copped Beach usage as a car park with a frequent Line 4 and X4 service into Wokingham and Bracknell town centres is anticipated to be low, but opening it and to consider potential options for its usage were considered to be the best way forward at the moment. Due to a change in working patterns, the demand for park and ride nationally has reduced. Consequently, no income target was set for this financial year. To date, there have been 78 parked vehicles using the site. 36 of the users were EV charging bays. The cost of operating the site to date is £4,122, of which £1,343 is covered by grant funding. The largest proportion of the cost to date relates to an annual maintenance charge for the parking machines. Income to date is £220. Therefore, the operating loss to the council to date is £2,559. When making the decision to open the park and ride, it was made clear that if it is not used, it may close again. It is too early to decide on the site's future. However, it should be noted that there is a month-on-month growth in the number of users parked. We are actively talking to partners and seeking opportunities to encourage further use of the site. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary, Mr Humphreys?
I do.
Thank you.
The gamble to build a speculative zero-use car park is clearly fouled, and I presume there is no plan B. The site has good road and bus connections, and thus would be ideal for housing, thereby saving a few green fields from development. It shouldn't be difficult to negotiate a change of use agreement and maybe a financial settlement with the developer who provided the current white elephant. Is the council plans to do this, or will the eyesore be preserved as a monument to folly?
As I said in my response to you, we're considering all options at the present time.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. We have another question. Alison Swaddle is going to read it out for us on behalf of John Sefton. Thank you, Alison.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My resident has nominated me to read his question as he can't be here tonight. The question is to the Executive Member for Environment, Sport and Leisure. Why can't the preliminary schedule for road cleaning be posted on the website, which would enable the public to provide feedback? The routes and frequency should all be in accordance with both the consultation results from last year and the 2024-2025 budget. Aspirations are hard to monitor.
Thank you, Alison. It is our intention to make the schedules available on the website. However, the new contract changes are still bedding in, and we want to make sure that the revised routes have been fully tested over several cycles throughout the spring. We have the street cleansing data from the autumn and winter period, which has been adjusted, and we need to ensure that the annual schedule is working efficiently before publishing the information. We expect the schedules to be uploaded in the summer.
That marks the end of question time. Those of you who look at the agenda quite closely will have noticed that I forgot the Mayor's announcements, and I did actually want to share with you what a pleasure it was to share Chinese New Year with quite a few of our Hong Kong residents. We had a traditional Chinese New Year ceremony with candles and joss sticks and all sorts of fruit and goodies, including some very posh jam. Out in the back end of Wokingham, behind Winnish. It was attended by a huge number of local Hong Kong people, and it was the first opportunity I've had to speak to many of them, and it was so lovely to find that they felt very welcome in Wokingham Borough. They'd settled happily and their children had settled happily into schools, and they were enjoying their life. And I think that's a real compliment to us as a borough to be so welcoming to our colleagues from other countries, especially that Hong Kong residents. Thank you. Are there any petitions? Okay. Item 114, the medium-term financial plan. This item comprises 4 budget reports, which will now be considered together under the agenda item. The 4 reports are housing revenue, capital programme, treasury management and the medium-term financial plan. I would like to remind members that we have 1.5 hours for the consider of this item. I understand that Councillor Stephen Conway is proposing that. Is that correct, Stephen?
It is, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Over to you, Stephen. Oh, sorry. You need a seconder.
I think I have a seconder.
Thank you. That's Imogen.
I'm seconding. Thank you.
Stephen, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We live in difficult times. Over the last 2 years, the Council has been confronted with the twin challenges of inflation and rising demand for statutory services, especially in adults and children's social care. Significant numbers of our residents are affected by the cost of living crisis or grapple with serious mental and physical health challenges. In these most testing of financial circumstances for all councils, we need to focus on 2 fundamental requirements. First, to do all we can to help those for whom life is a struggle now. And second, to lay the foundations for a better future. Before I say more on how these 2 requirements have shaped the budget, I want to express my gratitude to the Chief Finance Officer, the senior officers in the corporate leadership team, and staff across the Council for their hard work in preparing this budget. As always, councillors are indebted to our professional officers, without whom we could do nothing. I'm also grateful to my executive colleagues. While they have all played their part superbly, I particularly want to thank Imogen Shepherd-Dubey, the Executive Member for Finance. My thanks are likewise due to the members of the All-Party Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee for their thorough and thoughtful scrutiny of the draft budget. During the scrutiny process, which stretched over many months, executive members were required to answer questions on the budget lines for which they have responsibility. To reinforce that transparency, the approved budget papers will be published on the Council's website with a clear indication of which executive member is responsible for the different areas of the budget. I'm very grateful to members of the public for their support of our campaign for fairer funding from central government, especially the more than 1,000 borough residents who wrote to the Secretary of State backing our cause. Sadly, the opposition did not support our campaign. Indeed, they chose to defend the government's underfunding of Wokingham rather than stand up for Wokingham as we have done. Opposition members have persisted for many months with the politically motivated claim that Wokingham is well funded, conveniently forgetting that they argued the complete opposite when they ran the council. They might want to ponder further whose side they really are on, our residents or the government's. Just as we are on our residents' side, so they are on ours. I'm pleased to say that their letter writing was worth the time and effort. At the end of last month, we received the welcome news that the government has belatedly decided that in view of our challenges with inflation and rising demand for statutory services, especially in adults and children's social care, we should be given an extra £1.6 million. Unfortunately, this extra core revenue funding, though it helps, is nowhere near what we need to tackle the pressures created by inflation and continuing increases in demand for social care. Even after the government's latest contribution, we still have an extra savings challenge of £16 million for 2024-25. We intend to meet this challenge partly by using a small portion of the Council's earmarked reserves, which we believe can now safely be released, but mainly through further savings and efficiencies, such as reducing staffing costs, including by holding vacancies at a higher level than we have ever done before. We would rather not have to increase the council tax by 4.99%, but experience shows us the folly of too heavy a reliance on reserves to cover current expenditure. Neighbouring Windsor and Maidenhead levied a 0% council tax for several years, paying for services by running down reserves. Short-term popularity was put above long-term financial viability. The Conservatives who ran Windsor and Maidenhead until last May presided over this folly, and the new Liberal Democrat administration is having to weather the current storm with hardly any reserves left to help. I should add that the government's calculations of our overall spending power assume that we will raise council tax to the cap that ministers have set. The government, in short, has eased the pressure on us slightly, but that pressure remains very considerable. A great deal of hard work by officers and senior councillors has been required over many months to produce the balanced budget in the papers before you. I want to return now to the two strategic imperatives that have underpinned that hard work. First, helping those who are most in need. We've acquired a new care home to increase our own provision for the elderly and infirm. We are repurposing some of the council's own properties to give the homeless a roof over their heads and provide accommodation for care leavers. We are increasing the number of places within the borough for children with special educational needs, mainly through the delivery of 2 new schools funded by a successful bid for a government grant. We are working alongside our partners in the voluntary and charitable sector to support local people during the current cost of living crisis. We have used a significant portion of the extra money from government to relieve the pressure on adults and children's social care, removing from the draft budget the most challenging and risky of the savings targets in those directorates. We're also putting more money in the general fund balances, the Council's General Use Reserve, to be available to help those of our residents who are experiencing the greatest hardship, as well as to protect the Council against unforeseen additional costs in adults and children's services, where demand and the cost of meeting it can rise dramatically and without warning. If the needs of the present are very much in our minds, we have also sought to build for the future. We have funded Invest to Save initiatives, including prevention and early intervention measures, which will lessen demand and therefore costs to the council and council taxpayers in years to come. We've also entered into major partnerships that will enable us to secure more external resources to help make our borough a better place to live and work. Our new care home will not only increase our capacity to deliver care for the elderly, it will also help us to control future adult social care costs. Our repurposing some of the council's estate to help house the homeless will reduce the bill for expensive emergency bed and breakfast accommodation. Our investment in the new special needs schools will increase in-borough provision and so reduce the costs of home to school transport. Investment in our mainstream schools will allow them to expand, which will give the borough's young people the education they deserve, as well as help to reduce pressure on the home to school transport budget. We've invested in a new solar farm at Barkham, which will connect to the grid in 2026, helping with our climate emergency agenda while generating a healthy income for the council, about 3 times as much as the previous administration estimated. In pursuit of longer-term benefits, we've established a strategic partnership with the University of Reading, which will enable us to draw on its expertise to help with our local climate emergency response, our town centre strategy, and our education, employment and skills ambitions. The university and the council will be able to bid jointly for funds for projects of common interest. At the same time, we've played a pivotal role in the creation of the Berkshire Prosperity Board, which brings together the 6 unitary councils in a partnership that will be able to bid for substantial government funding for cross-authority infrastructure projects, the kind of funding we could not hope to acquire on our own. Madam Mayor, there's not time for me to talk about other very positive features of this budget, but my executive colleagues will be able to speak about some of the important initiatives in their own areas of responsibility. Council, I commend this compassionate, responsible and forward-looking budget to colleagues. I hope all councillors will support it. While other councils are going to the wall, we are devoting additional resources to helping those most in need, putting our finances on a more sustainable footing, and at the same time, laying the foundations for a better future for our borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Imogen, do you want to speak now or reserve your right?
I'd like to reserve my right and speak later at the end, please.
Thank you. I will shortly ask who else wishes to speak on these items, but before I do so, I would like to invite the Leader of the Opposition, Councillor Pauline Jorgensen, to speak to the budget reports. Councillor Jorgensen, you have 12 minutes to speak to these reports.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to start on an item of agreement. I'd also like to thank all the officers for their help and hard work in producing this budget. And I'd also like to thank the exec members for answering lots of questions in scrutiny, which were very useful, and also their supporting officers. But in April, the Liberal Democrats promised residents they would offer financial competence and compassion. They've done neither. Failing to deliver Bowhunt School, allowing building costs to spiral, and telling teenagers in July that they'd have to find alternative sixth form places in September is neither competence nor compassion. Telling businesses it's too easy to blame Woking Borough Council for a fall in shoppers when the council had doubled car parking charges and funded free Christmas bus travel to take shoppers out of the borough is not competence or compassion. Letting flats in Carnival Hub sit empty and half finished, allowing building costs to increase, is not competence, and failing to finish these flats for people trying to get on the housing ladder is not compassion. It is a failure to act, a failure to take responsibility, and a failure to put Woking Borough residents above short-term opportunism. Liberal Democrats are all talk and little action. Many successes they've claimed come from the work of previous Conservative administrations, with Lib Dems always trying to claim the credit. Every poor choice, and Lib Dems blame everybody but themselves. They repeatedly this year warned that the council was on the brink of bankruptcy, yet last year the CFO report said the council finances were in good shape under the previous Conservative administration. In 2020, under the Conservatives, Working Borough was rated in the top 20 for financial sustainability by the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy. When the Conservative group left office, the council's core spending power was 151 million. The core spending power for this coming year is 174.8 million, thanks to council taxpayers and increased government grants. With an extra 23.8 million, the Liberal Democrats tell us they still haven't got enough. Whilst we receive less revenue support grants in other areas, it's fiction that Woking Borough has less money than other councils to spend on services. Our core spending power per household is more than any other council in Berkshire, apart from Slough, more than most unitary councils in England. It's right for any administration to lobby government for their area, but it's shameful to misrepresent the council's financial position to residents and to employees. And it's not right to cause alarm to residents and staff by peppering communications with references to bankruptcy and redundancy. Despite having more money to spend than other councils, the Liberal Democrats can't live within their means. They've lost control of the council's finances and are plugging the gaps taken from reserves. The Lib Dems made a big fuss about reserves when they were in opposition. Now they plunder away. Last year to pay for the wheelie bins and this year to plug another budget gap. This demonstrates more than anything else that reserves were healthy under a Conservative administration, and the Liberal Democrats know it and knew it then. Over the last 2 years, the Liberal Democrats have made it clear where their spending priorities are, and they are the wrong priorities. Not surprising when this administration actively chooses not to listen to local people when they express a view. As Lib Dem executive members see it, in their words, a consultation is not a referendum. How do Lib Dems ignore residents? Let us count the ways. Consultation supporting all-out elections, which would have cost cuts significantly, ignored. Petition from over 4,000 residents against doubling car parking charges, ignored. Business crying out for reversal of car parking increases, ignored. Petition from over 800 residents to stop the redevelopment of California Crossroads, ignored. Consultation on bin collections when only 24% of residents agreed they liked fortnightly collections, ignored. Petition from over 1,700 residents on Hall Farm, ignored. Petition of nearly 2,000 residents to keep weekly bin collections, ignored and branded spurious. Petition for a pedestrian crossing outside Crossfield School, delivered to the council nearly a year ago, ignored. And in response to my question about a crossing after an accident, instead of acting, the Liberal Democrat executive member said, accidents happen. The administration gave the game away about their approach to roads when the exec member for highways said that they wanted to stop inappropriate journeys. Leave aside the breathtaking arrogance and thinking that councillors and officers have a right to decide what an appropriate journey is. It makes it plain from all to see that the Liberal Democrats are driven by an ideological obsession with stopping people using cars, and we will see more of that tonight. That's why they doubled car parking charges, despite clear opposition from residents. The refusal to change course demonstrates that this administration doesn't care about the negative impact these charges will have on business or jobs. We've already made it clear that a future Conservative administration would reverse these increases. The Liberal Democrats have also consistently underfunded road repairs, despite receiving almost £1 million extra from the government to fix potholes this year. Under a Conservative administration, we would again increase spending on road repairs, as we did when we had control, maximising available grants and renewing a focus on reducing congestion. On waste, rather than investing in enabling more recycling, the Liberal Democrats have reduced household waste collections to every 2 weeks. It's not a better service for residents, it's not efficiency, because the lorry's coming every week anyway, without collecting all the bins, and it's not guaranteed to produce any savings. A Conservative administration would reinstate weekly waste collections and expand the range of items included in recycling. We also saw the farce last summer of the Liberal Democrats' attempts to scrap some public bins and reduce the collection of others. Of course, the inevitable result was rubbish blowing across the streets and parks and heaps of discarded dog poo bins. The administration only stepped in to put a stop to the ridiculous situation after the Conservatives forced their hand. But this Liberal Democrat administration has such contempt, they tried to claim no decision had been made, even though the bins across the borough were earmarked for removal and covered to prevent public use. 2 years on from the election, the Liberal Democrat administration, where is your local plan? Failing to deliver a local plan is opening the borough up to speculative development, and it's costing taxpayers money to defend appeals and handle the consequences of inappropriate development. We're glad to see this budget finally includes reductions in some HR costs, which were called for in last year's budget by us, as well as a reduction in the use of consultants. However, it's clear from the budget papers where one use of consultants goes down, another increases, this time to implement residence parking zones. In the months following the elections in 2022 and 2023, the administration announced and implemented disastrous policies and then conveniently forgot to tell the public about before residents had their say in the ballot box. Increasing parking charges wasn't in your manifesto, scrapping public litter bins wasn't in your manifesto, and bin collecting moving to fortnightly wasn't in your manifesto. I wonder what you're planning for next year, because obviously it won't be in your manifesto. So if Liberal Democrats are still in charge of the council after the votes have been counted in May, what horrors will they have in store for the summer? Ultimately, this Liberal Democrat budget can't be passed without the votes from Labour councillors. Labour's support for this Liberal Democrat administration may not be a formal coalition this year, but is no less necessary to drive through unpopular policies which ignore residents' wishes and stoke up people's fears. Next time Labour try to distance themselves in a leaflet or on the doorstep or in this chamber from another Lib Dem disaster, remember it was Labour that made it possible. Madam Mayor, last year's budget was a poor offering for residents. This year, little has changed. It's less for more. Bins will be collected less often. Another real terms cut in road maintenance, despite an increase in government funding, cuts to street cleaning and grass cutting, loss of one leisure centre, failure to deliver at Arborfield swimming pool, and a local plan they're too scared to show residents before the election. In return, people will pay 4.99% more council tax, and fees and charges will rise by an eye-watering 8%, double the rate of inflation. The people of this borough, the residents outside this building who daily live with the consequences of this administration, deserve better. In May, residents will get the chance to elect a Conservative administration that will put the community first, will restore sound administration of the council's finances, and will deliver the best for Wokingham Borough.
I will now invite other members to speak. Members, you are asked to note that the usual rules of debate apply. You are permitted to speak for 3 minutes. Please raise your hands if you wish to speak.
You got them.
You can change arms if you like. Okay.
Do you want to stop Norman Young?
Oh, Andy Croy, please, first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'd like to continue thanks to Graham and his team for all the work they've done. I'm sort of rather wondering if perhaps they can do a little bit of work with Pauline's maths as well, because her ability to count the number of councillors that make up the different groups is almost matched by her ability to put together a balanced budget last year. Right, Madam Mayor, On reading recommendation 5 of the capital programme and strategy, I'm reminded that the problem with Conservatives is that sooner or later they will run out of public assets to sell off. As Macmillan put it, selling off the family assets, selling off the family silver was a sign of families and states in distress. What Macmillan probably wasn't expecting was that our Conservative government, your Conservative government, has created the distress which this council now faces. The Conservative has simultaneously loaded statutory responsibilities onto the council while cutting central government funding. Year after year of cuts to funding and impairment to our revenue raising ability. Page 174 of the report, to those of you who've read it, makes clear there's been a 50% reduction in central government funding to this council since 2010. For as long as I can remember, visiting this council as a resident and then as a member, the Conservatives have complained about the lack of funding from their own government. But what they don't seem to realise is that this is actually the Conservative plan. These are the final stages of the Conservative long-term economic plan, forcing the distressed sales of publicly owned assets. Sales of assets, not just to protect the tax breaks for the rich, but to create a firestorm of local authority sales for the benefit of capital. This stage is not as obvious as the horrendous privatisations of the Thatcher years, but in some ways it is worse. These decisions are hidden away in hundreds of town halls. The burden of approval is shifted to thousands of councillors, and the loss is inflicted on hundreds of communities. And in our communities, which assets will be sold? Will it be Shoot End? Will the sale of Shoot End, less the renovation costs of Marks and Spencer's, provide us with a capital receipt? Or perhaps it's a park somewhere. Who knows? But this is not an accident. Their government is giving us this authorisation instead of properly funding local authorities. This is not a random act of nature. It is a political choice. And your party did this. Your party has forced this item onto our agenda and forced the possible sales of assets to raise revenue locally. The Conservatives should hang their heads in shame that it has even come to thinking about this. And I heard a little murmur, is this even in the budget? It's item 5 on the capital strategy. If you haven't read it, you need to read it.
Thank you, MD. Rebecca Margetts, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The budget presented to us tonight is disappointing. There are limited aspirations for progress and growth within sports and leisure. The aim of the Leisure Service is to promote a healthy and active population within our borough. However, there is little investment and there are a few positive plans on how to achieve this. The failure to meet the leisure income target has resulted in a deficit of £500,000. A staggering increase is announced in the cost of parking at California Country Park. Many families enjoy a day at the park, but a 15% increase from £8 to £9.20 will only push cars onto local residential streets and hit the pockets of our hard-working families, who the Liberal Democrats constantly claim they are supporting. A further announcement is the proposed introduction of peak car parking charges at the borough's countryside parks. This is a further taxation on our residents when they use these services most in the school holidays and weekends. How can the Lib Dems say they are supporting our working families when this is the main time that they are able to visit these parks? Current capital projects have made little progress over the last 2 years of Lib Dem control. The Grays Farm Sports Hub is delayed, and there are no firm commitments on delivery dates for the Montague Park community facilities. This is all at a time when the closure of St Crispin's has been announced. The long-delayed playing pitch strategy has still not arrived, and we have no sight of when we will see it. The long-promised swimming pool at Arborfield Green has mysteriously disappeared from the capital programme. WBC is late with the delivery of the community centre and late with delivery of the sports hub and sports pitches. The residents of Arborfield are failed again. Delays and indecision when it comes to these projects are having a huge impact on our residents. It is time for a new approach with leisure, which aims to provide a platform of opportunity for residents to be active across our communities. This budget does not achieve this. It is now time to get on with these long overdue projects so people can benefit from the money being spent, rather than prevarication and paperwork.
Councillor Bray, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Money is very tight across the council, so I'm extremely grateful to my executive colleagues and to the corporate leadership team that despite all the other pressures on us, they have been willing to work together to find more money for children's services this year. The biggest single increase is to the home to school transport budget. For years, the council has been underestimating it and overspending the budget as a result. Now we have brought in systems to help us better predict who we need to transport where and to size the budget accordingly. And I think we are much closer to what's required. One reason why our home to school transport budget is so high is lack of special educational needs provision locally. This administration is doing everything it can to sort that out. New special schools, extra capacity for early years children and new units in our mainstream schools are all either already opened or in the pipeline. By failing to address this when they were running the council, the Conservatives let children down. They also let council taxpayers down. By not thinking strategically or long-term about services, whether for children with additional needs, children with disabilities or children at risk of harm, they have left us exposed to the mercy of the market to an uncomfortable and expensive extent. And judging by the speech by the Leader of the Opposition and her bizarre and financially illiterate comments, they are still not capable of thinking strategically or long-term, or possibly of thinking coherently at all. By contrast, we have been working on long-term plans to ensure quality and control costs. We have a safety valve funding deal with the government as part of a huge SEND improvement journey. We will be delivering more council-owned accommodation for young people at risk of homelessness or who are leaving care. We are opening our own children's homes. We are investing in our social workers. We are working strategically with health and schools and other partners so that we jointly have the most effective and efficient services for children we can. These decisions are invest to save decisions, but they are also about what is best for children. Whether we are talking education or social care, effective early intervention is both cheaper and gives children the best outcomes. Despite all the financial challenges, this administration is determined to improve outcomes for all children, but particularly for those who need our help most. I would like to end by thanking all the staff in Children's Services who work so hard to do their best for the children of the borough, and I commend this budget to you.
Councillor Graham Howe, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. From what we can see in the narratives provided on pages 213 and 214, the agenda has not changed as regards the budgetary planning from 4 years ago in children's services. Indeed, it was the previous administration that put in place the things which we're pleased to see with continued investment and continuity of implementation going forward for the betterment of our children. Primary role of children's services, upon which everyone in this chamber will be agreed, is to provide a good education for every child in the borough. There are two areas of statutory responsibility, which are to look after the vulnerable and safeguarding of children. The other area of statutory responsibility is admissions, whereby the borough works together with the 66 schools. All secondaries and nearly all primary schools are academies, with the majority performing at high Ofsted grades. The two new SEND schools will be academies. We all know that academies are assessed by Ofsted, and the local authority, as such, has no further influence on the running of those schools, as it becomes the responsibility of academy trusts who report to the schools commissioners. not local authorities. There is no mention of reform in the MTFP, so that Wokingham budgets realign those functions that academies now own. There's room here for a lot of reforms, but the provision for change in this MTFP is lacking. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the ruling party for the support given to me and my colleagues when we put the investments in place for capacity and SEND, which are reflected in this MTFP. The budgets approved in March 2022 were made with the conscious knowledge of us all that they were not the end game, but the beginning of a necessary journey. The rhetoric from various executive lead members, and mainly it must be said by those who clearly do not have an understanding of children's services, alleging children's services would bankrupt the council, talk complete tosh. Am I allowed to use that word? The rhetoric needs to reflect the reality. Today's MTFP is a continuation of a difficult journey and has been supported by huge grants made by a Conservative government with whom negotiations had started in 2021. Oh, you can shake your head. Children's services are not bankrupting Wokingham, as those guilty of saying so bleated, but the MTFP is continuing the journey that was instigated 4 years ago. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Ian Shenton, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Our friends in the opposition are keen to perpetuate the myth that somehow Conservatives are superior to all others in the art of managing council finances, but it is a myth, and their assertions don't stand up to scrutiny. Take, for example, the January article in Wokingham Today that covered an IEMD in which I authorised the potential repurposing within the waste collection project, a part of the saving achieved on the procurement of wheel bins. The leader of the opposition said, this could have been used to prevent more cuts to services and hikes in charges. No, it couldn't. The capital comes from the Waste Equalisation Fund, where any unspent money will remain. She knows that to be the case, and so her statement indicates either a penchant for Johnsonian truth or a willingness to recklessly pillage any capital reserve that she can lay her hands on. Which is it, Councillor? Then there's the much vaunted election pledge to return to weekly waste collections without specifying what she would cut to fund it. Would it be the services for the most vulnerable to which we have allocated the saving? And it would take far more than clawing back the saving, as with the existing fleet, it's physically impossible to empty 70,000 wheel bins in 1 week using one bin lift to one compartment. It can only be done by using both bin lifts to both compartments. So are you going to double the fleet, or maybe return to the Fox's favourite of single-use plastic bags, discarding £1 million worth of bins? It seems odd that your shadow member for Waste and Finance didn't alert you to these minor difficulties in delivering your election pledge. Maybe not so odd, though, given that a year ago he told this chamber that he would increase recycling rates by recycling such things as pet bedding. Surely he knows it's a biohazard, and anything that it contaminates must go to landfill or incineration. For some time, Conservatives have demonstrated their speciality of pairing waste with finance. 37 billion on COVID test and trace, 12 billion on useless PPE, 10 billion on recoverable COVID loans. Now they want to inflict on Wokingham their skills in wasting public finance. And that is why I see this MTFP as the only way forward in this harsh financial circumstance fashioned by their government, a government that the leader of the opposition wishes to extend and indeed to join. Yes, she's striving to join the government that has systematically impoverished councils like Wokingham, causing reduced services to the very residents that she allegedly represents. How bizarre.
Councillor Norman Jorgensen, please.
Thank you. Firstly, I would like to thank the council officers and the executive members for explaining the items in the budget during several scrutiny meetings over the last few months. I think it was extremely useful. Thank you. The core spending grants from government have increased by
2.3 million over the amounts provided last year. On top of this, there are specific grants such as the social care grant. These grants take the total from government up to 30 million. And on top of this are things like housing benefit funding, funding for the special educational needs schools, and for road repairs. From the frequent outpourings from the Liberals, who would be excused for thinking the council received absolutely nothing from government, the current funding formula for co-funding is based largely on deprivation, and Woking Borough comes out very low down on this scale. This has been the case through successive Labour, Conservative Liberal and Conservative governments, and I very much doubt, if we were governed by Labour, that Woking would be preferred over Blackpool. Of the 2.3 million increase in core spending grant, 1.6 million was awarded quite late in the budgeting process and has not been subject to scrutiny. It appears 900,000 of this has been allocated to adult social care and children's services, which seems very sensible. The other 700,000 has been added to general reserves, i.e. it's been put in the bank, which seems strange when at the same time services such as grass cutting, gutter cleaning and street sweeping have been cut, and £4.7 million has been taken out of less reported reserves to balance the budget. Residents will recall the faux horror expressed by the Liberals when the then Conservative administration took £2 million out of the reserves to help with the COVID pandemic. Since then, the Liberal-Labour coalition agreed to take 3.2 million out of reserves for 23-24, and in 24-25, the Liberals are proposing to take a further 4.7 million from reserves to balance the budget. I urge them to prepare balanced budgets without reading reserves here. Finally, we see the lamentable performance on business case transparency. The changes the Liberals are planning to make to waste collection, moving to fortnightly for general waste and dry recycling, have an upfront cost of £2 million with no guarantee of payback on this investment, as any savings are forecast to be largely from people deciding to recycle more. I also expect that when the waste collection contract is retendered in 2026, we will be charged considerably more as a result of this change in collection regime. Thank you.
Paul Fishwick, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Road maintenance is the largest part of my budget area, and there are clearly challenges. Nationally, the latest road maintenance study found that there was a backlog of over 14 billion in local road repairs due to a decade of underfunding by this Conservative government. Contrary to what the Conservatives may claim, in their final budget, inherited by the Lib Dems, Conservatives cut the council's road maintenance by 28%. This was presumably because of financial pressures which have got much worse, but which the Conservatives claim are not real. Despite record levels of inflation and growth in the council's costs, we have protected the road maintenance budget in cash terms. We have also introduced innovations to make this money go further. We would like to do more, but this could only be at the expense of services which are critical to the well-being of local people. However, the government's cancelled HS2 project has provided us with an additional 418,000 that we will be committing to strategic maintenance. This will pay to resurface around 0.37% of our road network. Currently, 14% of our roads are already assessed in need of resurfacing. The reality is that additional funding is unlikely to offset the ongoing deterioration of our roads, let alone restore them to the standard we want. We now have an approved local cycle and walking infrastructure plan, and we're awarded 606,000 Active Travel England to develop and consult on the Winnersh to Wokingham corridor. This plan is now being used to set priorities for new designs and delivery, and will be used to support bids for further external funding that will provide good alternative safe travel routes across the borough and supports our emergency climate change objectives. We're also awarded £800,000 for our bus service improvement plan that has enabled us to reintroduce services and offer free bus travel to build back business. We have also extended the supported bus network until September 2026 with additional funding and provide some certainty to our residents that is vital for their day-to-day lives and vital for our local economy. We've also obtained moving traffic offence powers, and using camera technology, we are making our streets safer to use and plan to expand on these as well as introduce school streets. This budget has gone through full scrutiny. They are sound and sustainable finances. I support this budget. Thank you.
Councillor Laura Blumenthal, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This budget shows that this administration has its priorities in the wrong places. It's made much of its fund to apparently open up access for low-income residents to activities, but at the same time, plans to raise the prices for parking at country parks, has ended subsidised school bus travel for the poorest families, will end funding the One Front Door service through Citizens Advice that helps the most desperate and takes the strain off local charities, and plans play area rationalisation, which you can all imagine what that means. It's give with one hand and take much more with the other, and this is taking from the poorest in the borough. Of course, Lib Dems saying that the financial times are tough, which we all agree with, but it all comes back to priorities. They're spending taxpayers' money on football membership for kids, raising obstacles for them to go to country parks, and what will play area rationalisation mean for their local play area. It's all very well putting out press releases on nice to have activities, but cutting the key support in the background for the lowest income residents is just not going to help them or this council in the long term. We're also seeing more strategies written with no measurements and nothing leading to concrete outcomes for residents. When this council gets money, it's spent on paper, not people. And we need to put people over PR. The latest Lib Dem leaflet leads on taking credit for the government's household support fund and a continuation of the previous Conservative administration's work, painting a picture that all the activity and support financially is down to the Lib Dems. I'm not surprised, as they wouldn't want to promote what they have in this budget and are doing financially to the poorest families, to their children, to the financially desperate, and to the parks and play areas they enjoy. The leaflet even says people over politics, when it's quite the opposite. This activity masks the true cost the poorest in the borough are paying. If the Conservatives regain control of this council, we'll row back on the Lib Dems' decision to cut subsidised school bus travel for low-income families. This is fair and puts people first.
Councillor Clive Jones, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Having been at many council budget meetings over the last 12 years, I've heard council leaders since David Lee tell us Wokingham was the lowest funded unitary authority in the country and that the council needed more financial support from the government. David's successor, Keith Baker, said in February 2015, "In keeping with the long-standing tradition, I am sure you will be familiar with the fact that Wokingham is the lowest funded authority in the country." Charlotte Haytham-Taylor, his successor, in February 2018 told us, "I can't stress enough that the situation for this council has never been tougher." Her successor, Julian McGee-Sumner, in February 2019 told us, "As most of us in this chamber will know, we have been the worst funded authority in the country for a considerable number of years." John Halsall started in February 2020 by reminding us we were the lowest funded authority in England. In 2022, he added, "The financial future looks both challenging and uncertain. Currently, we receive the lowest level of support per head of population in the country." At various times over these years, some of the Conservative leaders have thanked local MPs for their help in putting the council's case to the government for better funding. In May 22, the Lib Dems took over the administration of the council. We have continued to put the case to the government for Wokingham Borough Council needing a fairer deal from the government. We looked to MPs for support. None came. Imagine my surprise when the latest Conservative leader last year suddenly decided that Wokingham was no longer starved of funding by the government. In fact, she now believes the council to be well funded, which she confirmed this
Point
evening.
of personal explanation, please.
Please don't interrupt. I know you said you'd do this last July, but really, it's got quite boring.
I've got a right to a point of personal explanation.
Thank you. Clive, would you sit down for a moment, please? Pauline, your point is?
My point is that what I was saying is that the council is the second highest funded authority in terms of core spending power in the county. That is correct, but that includes council tax. I have never said that we are high funded. I've never, ever said that. What I'm saying is your total amount of funds that you have to spend is high, higher than most of the rest of Berkshire. That's what I said.
Thank you.
May I continue?
Yes.
And lo and behold, Wokingham's MP has also changed his mind. Having previously supported previous leaders in their quest for more money, he now considers Wokingham to be a well-funded authority. They won't support local residents to get fair funding from the government, fair funding for children's services and adult social care, to support the most vulnerable in our community and maintain the roads to a reasonable standard. The leader of the opposition and Wokingham's MP prefer to play politics, shifting responsibility to the council for their government's inadequacy. Why won't these two Conservative politicians stand up for the residents of Wokingham rather than slavishly supporting their out of touch and nearly out of time government who continue to refuse to fund Wokingham Borough Council properly? I think we know why. They put the interests of their party before the interests of residents. They ought to be ashamed of themselves.
Clive, would you like to carry on? You missed 30 seconds because of the point of order.
Be quiet. I think it's the mayor's decision. Thank you. I'll do the last.
Oh, right. Sorry, Clive. The time has been added on. Would you like to sit, please? Oh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Interesting to follow on from Councillor Jones. Last May, while he was leader, Councillor Jones proclaimed that this change was hugely right. The previous month in the paper, he stated that he'd improved the council's relationship with local businesses. Open any recent Wokingham today to find out Councillor Jones' self-proclaimed infallible knowledge has failed him. Just last month, for example, a business owner in Wokingham Town Centre was said that levels of business in his shop declined significantly when the council doubled parking charges. He had added that WBC is adamant that footfall hasn't declined, but that is far from his experience. We know that the administration doesn't want to listen, but if usage of car parks and footfall has increased as the council claims, why have the Lib Dems still not published the ticket and revenue data despite repeated requests? On another matter, over a year ago, the council consolidated office space, moving staff to the basement and ground floor. This has saved on running costs, which is good. But despite promises to explore letting the empty space to generate an income, there's been no progress. It could have brought an income in excess of 300,000 per annum. The attitude of the council now seemed that it's just too difficult to do. The Money and Pension Service, a government body, recently moved from London into part of Bedford Council's offices. If Bedford and other councils can do it, why can't Wokingham? Alternatively, the space could be used by charities currently using other council buildings, such as the former library site. This would free those sites for commercial rent or redevelopment, generating income for the council. As we discussed earlier, the council sits on considerable assets which the Liberal Democrat leadership chooses to leave idle rather than generate income, whilst claiming that the council doesn't have enough money. The Liberal Democrats need to stop this woeful mismanagement of the council-owned properties and start delivering for local taxpayers.
Councillor Rachel Bishop-Firth, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In our budget meeting last year, Wokingham Borough Council established a hardship fund of £250,000, and I wanted to give a quick update on progress. The council selected a number of projects to tackle the root causes of poverty in our borough. We are maximising value to residents by providing seed funding for projects which will deliver long-term benefits for those who are in the most need. The Roots Community Pantry is now open. The lowest wages are no longer enough to pay for a healthy diet, and those who rely on benefits are even worse off. The pantry will make fresh foods and other essentials available to price that those on the lowest incomes can afford, and will help fight malnutrition in the borough. Our Removing Barriers programme has provided funding to help residents living on low incomes access service and events. For example, so that families living on low incomes and without access to public transport can access services run by Woodley Lunch Bunch. Wokingham Borough Council children with special educational needs and disabilities are benefiting from support to allow them to access the holiday activities and food programme. And finally, being able to access a full, rounded education is vital to give children choices for their future. We have funded 2 trailblazing projects to ensure that the cost of the school day, including school uniforms, is affordable for all families, and to improve access to school uniform and other essential learning tools for families living on low incomes. And we're investing in the futures of local children by supporting them to access co-curricular activities, including opportunities to play sport. We are continuing to fund the core Citizens Advice Bureau services. I would like to give reassurance to people on that. The core services that people were able to access prior to COVID, they will still be able to access. The government made the decision to end the funding which enabled us to run the One Front Door service. We are very concerned that the Household Support Fund is currently due to end in March, and the government hasn't yet confirmed whether it will continue. The funding pays for emergency grants and support during the school holidays for families who rely on free school meals. We are lobbying the government to continue supporting residents during the cost of living crisis. It's very difficult for both the council and our community partners to plan effectively when we don't know so close to the end date whether the money will continue. The root of the problem is that benefits now fall far short of the cost of basic essentials such as food, heating and housing. To prevent a complete collapse of the system, the government has to make short-term emergency grants. These are often announced at the last minute and are inadequate to cover the real scale of need. This is short-term thinking. If we're to eliminate poverty in Wokingham, we need long-term thinking from central government, proper realistic planning, and most of all a safety net which will pay for people's basic needs.
Councillor Charles McGetts, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. After 2 years of this administration, this budget continues a previous pattern of pet Liberal priorities ahead of resident priorities. We have another real terms cut in highway structural maintenance. Last year, the budget was frozen in real terms. This budget now shows this freeze continuing for another 3 years. With inflation around 5%, this means, to quote a highways officer, there'll be less road and pavement maintenance done next year than there was this year, and that will continue going forwards. When I knock on doors and talk to residents, the number one issue they raise is the condition of Wokingham roads. They're used by every resident. It's a universal service, and this is not good news. The Liberal Democrat administration is always keen to blame a lack of funding for every single issue. Wokingham receives a baseline sum of £4,200,000 from the government for road maintenance, and this year's had extra sums of £418,000 and £589,000. However, instead of more, we're getting less. The capital budget shows clearly the priority. 9 million is in the budget for the next 3 years for cycling and walking infrastructure, 1.2 million for active travel and bus priority schemes. There's plenty of investment for the things they want to do, but not for what residents want. The policies pursued are causing real harm to our town centres and local businesses. The doubling of car parking charges and an increase in the amount of PCN tickets given out last year from 16,000 in 2022 to nearly 24,000 2023. When you talk to local businesses, they'll tell you this is driving trade away from shops and restaurants. National chains will tell you their Wokingham branches are seeing drops in turnover and footfall well outside national averages. Boots has seen a drop in footfall of over 20%. Millets, before it closed, 50%. We need a climate in our town centres that makes them a good place to do good business. If we take control of this council, we'll roll back the parking charges and we'll rein in the traffic wardens. In Finch Hampstead, we have the ruinously expensive redevelopment of California Crossroads, scheduled to run for 7 months. Red Oak Stores told me earlier today they've experienced a 40% drop in turnover in 1 week. Cresswell's Garage, present in Finch Hampstead for 150 years, has seen its petrol sales fall by 75% in the 1 week. There's only 6.5 months of this to go. We then have the case of the missing car park figures. In September, we were told that car park usage was up since the charges were increased and the retailers were not experiencing drops in footfall. There was a promise to publish these figures. Then it was November, then it was December, then it was January. We're now at the end of February and there's no sign of these figures. I'm guessing they're going to appear in June with the new local plan perhaps, and conveniently 1 month after the elections. A senior highways officer said to me recently when I pressed him on this, there were no obvious trends in these figures. What's the real picture? Claims have been made which completely contradict what the businesses and the town centres say, and the long promised evidence has never seen the light of day. Looking to the future, we see the introduction of on-street parking is imminent. Not only will the road user... Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor David Hare, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This budget comes after years of austerity that has left adult social care chronically underfunded. Year on year, hard decisions need to be made to ensure we have a balanced budget, but this directly affects people's lives. Yet I hope we all know how important social care is to enable people to live lives to the full. Adult social care must be seen as a valued and critical part of the country's societal infrastructure if we are to have vibrant, inclusive and economically active communities. I would call on government to end this continued decline in services by fully implementing reforms to adult social care nationally, including fully funding social care and making social care wages on a par with the NHS. It seems ridiculous that the government's funding distribution formula does not recognise the level of need in the borough or the higher cost to meet that need in this part of the country. Indeed, we have the highest number of people with learning disabilities per 100,000, but this isn't recognised in the funding. For all of us, repetitive, one-off bits of money announced at short notice with different conditions attached makes it impossible to plan efficiently or invest in solutions over the long term. The extra money announced by the government recently for councils is of course welcome, but additional Wokingham allocation for children and adults amounts to less than 1% of these departments' budgets, with growth in adults alone running higher than 12% when you include the increase in the minimum wage. This won't have a significant impact. Having said that, I'm very proud to be an executive member for a department that had 2 social work awards, and won a municipal journal award. The council has signed up to Social Care Futures, a positive move forward in valuing and recognising the people who use our services. Despite the poor financial situation, I must congratulate my director, Matt Pope, and his excellent team for all the good work they do in providing the best service they can with very limited resources. Thank you.
Point of order, Madam Mayor. I would like to invoke 4.2.13.7, which is to amend one of the recommendations. Thank you. I understand Democratic Services have a copy, not coffee.
Councillor Croy, you need to get another member of your group to do it because you've spoken once.
Madam Mayor, a member may not speak again unless they are invoking a point of order, and this is one of the points of order you're allowed to invoke.
You repeat that.
So you're right. Normally, there are, however, a couple of conditions or circumstances where members can speak a second time, and one of those second times is to amend the motion.
Okay, thank you. Andy, which rule are you referring to?
I can look the rule up in 2 seconds. In fact, it was on 5G of the guidance, which was sent out by Priya, and it's the right to move an amendment under 4.2.13.11.
Thank you. Sorry, Andy, the advice is that that isn't correct. You do need someone else to propose the amendment.
Madam, we know I'm always right, but to save time, I found.
Could you change your name to Rachel?
Madam Mayor, can I propose that the amendment that Andy was trying to support, which I think Democratic Services have a copy of for everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Do you have a seconder?
Oh, not me.
Amazingly, he does.
Oh, what a system, Andy.
Who's the second? Madam Mayor, can I ask a question of clarification, please? No. Madam Mayor? I'm a bit confused about the timing of this. We haven't actually got to the proposals of the final voting yet. So, why is this in the middle of the discussion?
Yeah. It's fine, it can be done anytime, but we will get to the end of the speakers. Okay. He's Andy's the seconder now.
He can't be the seconder.
Oh, Rachel's no. Yeah. Andy, you can't second it either. Could you change your name to Rachel?
So I'm sorry, Madam, I'm not sure what this has got to do with Rachel.
Just change your name to Rachel. Just, yeah, Rachel, put your hand up, please. And that means you're seconding.
Are you saying that I can't second? If I can't second,
Yeah,
okay.
yes, yeah.
Excuse me, point of order. We've already had somebody propose this. We've now changed their mind. What is going on? Please, can we have some control here? Somebody has first proposed this amendment, and now we're changing. What is going on?
Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah,
I'll second it.
Thank you. Can we now go back to the speakers and ask Peter Harper to speak, please?
No.
Oh, can we not do that? No. Do we have to take a vote?
I'm now confused. I think we are awaiting Yeah, a circulation of an amendment, yes?
Yeah, sorry, it's coming round now.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, again, can I ask while that's being circulated, that time is taken off the time for debate? Yes.
Councillor Conway, can I ask you if you accept this amendment?
I'm very happy to accept the amendment, especially as I've read the Chief Finance Officer's comment on it. It's clearly a modest sum, but it will make a big difference to the attempt to secure CCTV in Woodley Town Centre, which is clearly something that we would want to support. I think, given that this is being webcast live and there might even be somebody watching it, it might be helpful if the proposer of the amendment is able to speak to the amendment so that everyone out there understands what this is that I'm happy to approve and incorporate in the budget.
The proposer. Yeah. Can I ask the proposer of the amendment to read it out, please?
Yes, certainly. The recommendation is to approve an additional item in the appropriate part of the MTFP, Woodley Town Centre CCT system, to the value of £15,000. The £15,000 matches the £15,000 of funding secured from the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office, and the consequential of this amendment will be to reflect in all other financial reports. If I could just say, we attended an excellent. Oh, I can't. Okay.
No.
All right. Sorry.
We now go back to the debate. Can I ask Peter Harper, please, to speak?
Madam Mayor, when I spoke on the Climate Emergency Action Plan in September, I voiced my disappointment that the Council had failed to deliver many of the initiatives in the plan, but to taking credit for the progress made by other organisations and our residents. This budget lays bare the scale of that failure to deliver and doesn't show how it is going to catch up with those missed targets. The capital investment to deliver renewable energy infrastructure, such as solar panels in car parks, schools and other council property, was set at £8 million in the 2022-23 budget. Today's budget has a carry forward of 8.8 million for this item, which means nothing has been delivered in the past 2 years. Despite this failure, there is a further 6.5 million in the budget for more renewable energy infrastructure, which no doubt will be carried forward each year. These solar panels are a key part of the Council's carbon neutrality plan, but this budget shows that there has been little or no progress. The Lib Dems are keen on zero carbon transport options and want to encourage people to use electric cars to travel around the borough. The last Conservative budget had an investment of £1.2 million per year to install electric vehicle charging points, but this budget has no money set aside for those electric charging points. The Lib Dems think that there are enough charging points in the area and their job is now done. Many of those people considering electric vehicles as their next car will be disappointed that the Lib Dems are failing to provide support for charging. The only car charging the Lib Dems are able to deliver are a doubling of car parking charges, charging for residents parking and the imminent on-street parking charges. A key plank of the move to carbon neutrality is improving the energy efficiency of the Council's own buildings and operations. Indeed, the 2022-23 budget put aside £3.7 million for the last 2 years to install low energy lighting, improve insulation and manage heating systems more efficiently. So it is disappointing that 2.8 million of this money is still unspent, meaning that these vital improvements are not being delivered as quickly as they should be, and the benefits in carbon reduction are yet to be achieved. Madam Mayor, unspent capital is not something to be proud of because it shows a failure to deliver the projects that improve services for our residents. And in the case of climate emergency projects, the impact is not just on the reputation of the Council, but the very future of our planet.
Councillor Bray.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it's 4212M. I'd like to propose that we suspend the relevant part of Standing Order 4221, which is the one that says the budget debate will take an hour and a half, and extend it for an additional 20 minutes, because I believe that there are a number of people still waiting to speak. We may not require the whole of the extra time, but we're getting towards the end of the budget.
Have you got
debate.
a seconder? Thank you.
We have to vote out.
Right, can I have a show of hands for an extension of 20 minutes? Thank you, that's carried. Back to our speakers. Councillor Mike Smith, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This evening is all about numbers, and the one I particularly like is 299. 299 is the maximum number of days the Tories can cling on to government and continue to treat the residents with disdain with their derisory funding. Communication only works if what you meant to say is clearly understood by the recipient, and social media is one of the very worst means of doing this. Lots of people spouting vile lies, misleading statements, deliberately intended to anger and sway people's opinion. We have seen recent irresponsible examples of this locally, with all sorts of nonsense spouted on Facebook and Twitter about roadworks, transport improvements like California Crossroads, the latest cycleway consultation, petitions of all sorts, and generally how bad Wokingham Borough Council is at everything they do, whether it's us or the officers. The government has made much of what they're gaining by the 19.8 billion they're saving from cancelling HS2. I didn't know Wokingham was in the north, but I suppose we should be grateful for the £418,000 that they are giving us, as the Minister said, to repair potholes and any other road maintenance, not just potholes. That will just about cover the resurfacing of the roundabout at Asda, another subject of Facebook angst. I understand the letter from the Transport Minister, Mark Harper, I assume no relation to anybody in the chamber, indicates that we will get 13 million over 10 years and has been trumpeted by our local opposition. I think the only indication we can guarantee is a change of government. I note that the proposed increase in council tax will raise just £8 million, but the cost of adult services and children's services are increasing by 17. It doesn't take a genius to work that out. The MTFP document also indicates where we are compared to 2010 when the Conservatives came to power. Our spending in power is just 52% compared to then. Unsurprisingly, service cuts have been forced by this government. Ridiculous claims by the opposition that they will continue with weekly bin collections and that huge amounts will be spent on roads without any indication of where that money will come from do not have any shred of credibility. It is 20 years of underinvestment and spending cuts that got us where we are. This budget is tough, but it is balanced. It is on firm financial foundations. It will help those that need it most, and I will support it. Thank you.
Councillor Lindsay Ferris, please.
Thank you. It has come to my attention that the opposition believes the council has money coming out of its ears. This is quite different from when they were in control, as I remember Tory leaders of the council saying that Woking was the lowest funded unitary authority in the country. This is a far cry from what is now being said by the leader of the opposition and the MP for Woking. I want to go on to Section 106 area. Section 106 agreements between councils, including Woking Borough Council and developers, is a common way of working with developers to ensure appropriate infrastructure is provided with a particular development or planning application. If you remember, we discussed Section 106 information in this council chamber only a few weeks ago. The council has several hundred S106 agreements. Some have completed, some are midway through delivery, and others are yet to start. The sums involved can range from a few £100s to several £1,000,000. These agreements identify the level of monies to be provided and specifies the use that could be made of these monies. It should be noted that any monies are specific to each development or planning application and are only to be used for these means. It cannot be transferred without the agreement of the developer to any other use, and it is not to be used for supporting services provided by the council tax. In fact, if the facility identified is subsequently not provided, then the council would need to return the money to the developer in question. Fortunately, this has only happened on rare occasions, but shows the council cannot use these funds as it likes. I do emphasise Section 106 is not for providing income to cover new revenue services, including adult social care, children's services, waste collection and planning that are paid for by the council tax. It has restricted specific uses only. And one final point, Section 106 is not for potholes, as these are also revenue funded. Thank you.
It takes Steve. Councillor Steve Newton, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The days when this council could spend 22,500 on a bench, do you remember the slug, are long gone. What is needed now is mature leadership, not a return to largesse and vanity projects. In the Chief Financial Officer's statutory report on page 160 of our agenda packs, it says, heading into the 2024-25 financial year, the financial standing of the council remains robust, with a number of significant local and national challenges ahead. This position has been maintained despite the borough facing some of the most acute challenges in many years. It has only been achieved through strong financial management. The council has established financial resilience and sustainability despite years of austerity, resulting in minimal real-term increases and often real-term decreases in government funding. Wokingham receives the lowest level of government grant funding across the Berkshire local authorities. Wokingham receives the lowest settlement funding assessment per head of population amongst unitary authorities. Wokingham receives the lowest core funding per head of population amongst unitary authorities, and Wokingham has lost 100% all of the revenue support grant. Yet despite all of this, there is still hope. Indeed, not just hope, there are real tangible achievements. This administration's ambition to continue to make Wokingham a better place to live embraces all of our residents. This ambition continues, and there is solid evidence to show that we are delivering It is not just empty words or slogans. Last March, the annual local authority road maintenance survey cited that £14 billion was needed to repair all the potholes in England and Wales. Yet in November 2023, Wokingham was in the top 20 local authorities for road maintenance, with nearly twice as many repairs on A roads and non-A roads than the average local authority. 2 new schools are being built to support our children with special educational needs. We have purchased a care home to help provide for the needs of our elderly residents. 3 children's homes have been opened to care for some of our children and young people who need additional support. We are enhancing our recycling. We are investing in renewable energy generation, and I could go on. Yes, there is more to be done, and we are not complacent. But with the will, determination, commitment, and capability that this administration brings, working alongside our officers and professionals, we can and indeed already are creating that better future together. Of course, we would love to go at a faster pace, but this budget continues to deliver for our residents whilst maintaining the prudent financial management that is so essential in these challenging times. I am proud to be a part of this, and I thank my executive colleagues and the directors and officers for all the hard work they're putting in to deliver for our residents. Thank you.
Councillor Keith Baker, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wasn't actually going to speak tonight, but in light of the very welcome additional item, the £15,000 for the proposed CCTV system in Woodley, I just would like to make a few comments. As leader of the Conservative-led Woodley Town Council, I'm very pleased, and I would like to put on record our thanks to the town centre manager, Brian Fennelly, who actually got the 15,000 from PCC. He got 5,000 first, got it held over, got another 10,000. He's worked diligently as the town centre manager for Woodley, and he really deserves our thoughts. Now, until this, the Conservative-led Woodley Town Council were prepared to complete the funding. We don't know how much it is because we're just starting the tendering process, but to complete the budget of the whatever the cost of the approved system that we're going for. So what this will do, I sincerely say thank you, it will allow us to actually put in an even better system, a more comprehensive system. It will be the first system in the whole of the borough. There isn't one in Earley, there isn't one in Wokingham. It will be the first in Woodley, nor Twyford either. So one last request, since the WBC now are going to be providing £15,000 capital dosh for this project, can we also ensure that the highways officers give us the permission to mount the CCTV cameras on the lampposts? Because I think it would be bizarre for the WBC to give us £15,000 and then say, no, you can't use the lamppost. So thank you.
That's the end of the speakers. Councillor Imogen Dubray, please to sum up.
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Seconding, yes, I'm seconding. Yeah. This Liberal Democrat administration has always first sought to ensure our money is spent on helping the people who need it the most: the elderly, the disabled, those on low incomes, and our children. These must be our priority, followed by public health, tackling environmental concerns. Then we could look at the additional services that we can offer, which are often the ones that help make Wokingham a great place to live. This is such as parks and leisure facilities. To be able to do this, we must ensure that the council stays financially stable. This is so we can carry on providing those services for our residents that a balanced and caring society needs to offer. Back in the financial year of 2021 to 22, the previous Conservative administration expected the capital financing requirement for this year to be 680 million. That is the money that they were expecting to borrow to cover the planned capital projects of this council. The cost of that much borrowing would be unaffordable. We still need to build roads and schools, and there is a large amount of debt to be paid off, but I'm pleased to report that for this year, We are now looking at a much more modest 382 million capital financing requirement. There is still much work to be done, but we have brought the Council's overly ambitious spending costs and borrowing under much better control and down to an affordable level. I'm happy to see that where we have borrowed money, it has been for things such as our new care home. This is a perfect example of a great investor save scheme with excellent social values. The budget before you was all presented over several months to our Corporate Community and Overview Scrutiny Committee, and councillors of all parties are on it. There's been plenty of opportunities to ask questions, explore and suggest alternatives. In addition, we have held a public consultation on our budget so residents could add their views to our priorities. Very late on, we received an extra grant of 1.6 million. We've allocated part of it to adult social care and children's services, reducing the most challenging budget risk areas. The rest has gone in our general fund reserve. That leaves it available to be used during the year if, for example, central government cuts our other grants that we use to support low-income families. We've had to find a phenomenal over £16 million worth of savings over the next year. It's going to be hard, and we have no choice but to put council tax up. And while this late additional government grant is welcome, certainly nothing we have received from the government, nothing at all this year, compensates for more than a fraction of the inflationary costs that we've cost us from running our services. This is why your core spending looks like it does. What is unhelpful is unsubstantiated, uncosted ideas that have no realistic means to be paid for, being thrown out for political advantage, and especially at the last minute. This only serves to harm our most vulnerable residents, and it also attacks the integrity of our budget setting process used to produce this realistic and balanced budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Imogen. Before we move to a recorded vote, the leader has the right to reply. Councillor Conway, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Keith. As for the rest, that's the best the opposition can do. They are indeed in a mess. Charles may care to note that the car park report that he believes will be delayed until June was actually published on the council's website today. This evening's debate has brought into sharp relief the difference between a responsible administration and an irresponsible opposition. The opposition have denied that Wokingham is underfunded, despite arguing to the contrary when they ran the council, preferring to side with their government rather than our residents. It must be deeply embarrassing for them that the government that they so loyally support has now acknowledged that we are indeed underfunded by giving us more money. Not enough, unfortunately, but enough to show that they share our view of the council's financial challenges, not the view of the local Conservatives. Like a cut price Truss Kwarteng Tribute Act, the opposition makes rash and unfunded pledges on extra spending or the foregoing of savings. In total, their commitments for 2024-25 amount to a staggering £4.3 million. That's an additional £4.3 million over and above the £16 million of financial challenges that the council already faces. And just in case you're wondering, that figure of 4.3 million has been independently verified. To pay this extra 4.3 million, they offer up their now rather threadbare old friend, back office savings, as if considerable staff savings have not already been made, combined with a reduction in consultants and agency staff, even though the leader of the opposition has acknowledged, at least at Personnel Board, where no one else is listening, that agency workers are not always the most expensive option. We, by contrast, have set a balanced budget which protects those in need, puts the council's finances on a sustainable long-term footing, and plans for the better future of the borough. I hope council, having rejected the opposition's cynical opportunism, will support our positive, compassionate, and forward-looking budget. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
First of all, we have the recommendation contained in the Housing Revenue Account Budget 24-25, report on page 7, recommendations 1 through to 7. I request that the Chief Executive takes a recorded vote.
Thank you. So I will be asking whether you vote for, against or abstention for the HRA budget. So Councillor Ainsley, for, against or abstention? For. Councillor Akhtar? Councillor Akhtar?
For.
Councillor Baker?
For.
Councillor Bishop Firth? For. Councillor Blumenthal? For. Councillor Bray? For. Councillor Burgess?
For.
Councillor Chadwick?
For.
Councillor Conway?
For.
Councillor Cornish?
For.
Councillor Cowan? Councillor Croy? For. Councillor Cunnington?
For.
Councillor Davis?
For.
Councillor Dennis? Councillor Ferris?
For.
Councillor Firmiger?
For.
For.
Councillor Glover?
For.
Councillor Gray?
I don't believe I can vote on it. Is this one I can't vote on?
Okay. Councillor Halsall? No. Councillor Hare?
For.
Councillor Harper?
For.
Councillor Helly-Simons? Right, yeah. Councillor Howe?
For.
Councillor Johnson?
For.
Councillor Jones?
For.
Councillor Jorgensen? Norman?
For.
Councillor Jorgensen Pauline? For. Councillor Kerr?
For.
Councillor Loyes?
For.
Councillor Malvern?
For.
Councillor Maggetts? Charles?
For.
Councillor Maggetts? Rebecca?
For.
Councillor Mather?
For.
Councillor Mickleby?
For.
Councillor Montgomery?
For.
Councillor Monroe?
For.
Councillor Neal?
For.
Councillor Newton?
For.
For.
Councillor Rance? For. Councillor Rowland?
For.
Councillor Shenton?
For.
I think that was me, but it's a 4.
Councillor Rochelle Shepherd-Debay?
For.
Councillor Skews?
For.
Caroline?
For.
Mike?
For.
Councillor Smith-Wain?
For.
Councillor Soame?
For.
Councillor Swaddle?
For.
Councillor Louise Wayhill?
For.
Councillor Eunice?
For.
Thank you, that's carried. We now move to the recommendation.
Madam Mayor, could I request for this part that there is a separate vote on recommendation 5, please?
Just 5.
That's a programme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you want to do that now?
Thank you, Andy. Yes, we will do that. Right, so we now move to the recommendations contained in the Capital Programme Strategy 24-27 report on page 57, recommendations 1, 2, 3, 4 and 6.
Okay, so you're voting on recommendations 1, 2, 3, 4 and 6. For, against or abstention. Councillor Ainsley?
For.
Councillor Akhtar?
Against.
Councillor Baker?
Against.
Councillor Rachel Bishop Firth?
For.
Councillor Blumenthal?
Against.
Councillor Bray?
For.
Councillor Burgess?
For.
Councillor Chadwick?
Against.
Councillor Conway?
For.
Councillor Cornish?
For.
Councillor Croy? Councillor Cunnington?
Against.
Councillor Davis.
Against.
Councillor Dennis. Councillor Ferris.
For.
Councillor Firmiger.
Against.
Councillor Fishwick.
For.
Councillor Glover.
For.
Councillor Gray.
For.
Councillor Hare.
For.
Councillor Harper.
Against.
Councillor Howe.
Against.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Jorgensen Norman.
Against.
Councillor Jorgensen Pauline.
Against.
Councillor Kerr.
For.
Councillor Loys.
Against.
Councillor Mulvern.
For.
Councillor Magetts Charles.
Against.
Councillor Magetts Rebecca.
Against.
Favour.
For.
Councillor Mickleby.
For.
Councillor Montgomery.
For.
Councillor Monroe.
Against.
Councillor Neal.
For.
Councillor Newton.
For.
Councillor Pittock.
For.
Councillor Rance.
Against.
Councillor Rowland.
For.
Councillor Shenton.
For.
Councillor Imogen Shepherd Bay.
For.
Councillor Rochelle Shepherd Bay.
For.
Councillor Skews.
For.
Councillor Caroline Smith.
For.
For.
Councillor Wayne Smith.
Against.
Councillor Soame.
Against.
Councillor Swaddle.
Against.
Councillor Wayhill.
For.
Councillor Eunice.
Against.
That vote is carried. We'll now take a vote on recommendation 5.
For, against or abstention. Councillor Ainsley.
For.
Councillor Akhtar.
Abstain.
Councillor Baker.
Abstain.
Councillor Bishop Firth.
For.
Councillor Blumenthal.
Abstain.
Councillor Bray.
For.
Councillor Burgess.
Against.
Councillor Chadwick.
Abstain.
Councillor Conway.
For.
Councillor Cornish.
For.
Councillor Croy.
Against.
Councillor Cunnington.
Abstain.
Councillor Davis.
Abstain.
Councillor Ferris.
For.
Councillor Firmiger.
Abstain.
Councillor Fishwick.
For.
Councillor Glover.
For.
Councillor Gray.
Against.
Councillor Hare.
For.
Councillor Harper.
Abstain.
Councillor Howe.
Abstain.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Norman Jorgensen.
Abstain.
Councillor Pauline Jorgensen.
Abstain.
Councillor Kerr.
For.
Councillor Loys.
Abstain.
Councillor Mulvern.
For.
Councillor Magetts Charles.
Abstain.
Councillor Rebecca Magetts.
Abstain.
For.
Councillor Mickleby.
For.
Councillor Montgomery.
For.
Councillor Monroe.
Abstain.
Councillor Neal.
For.
Councillor Newton.
For.
Councillor Pittock.
For.
Councillor Rance.
Abstain.
Councillor Rowland.
For.
Councillor Shenton.
For.
Councillor Imogen Shepherd Bay.
For.
Councillor Rochelle Shepherd Bay.
For.
Councillor Skews.
Against.
Councillor Caroline Smith.
4.
Councillor Mike Smith.
4.
Councillor Wayne Smith.
Abstain.
Councillor Soane.
Abstain.
Councillor Swaddle.
Abstain.
Councillor Wayhill.
Against.
Councillor Eunice.
Abstain.
That motion is carried. I'd now like to move to the recommendations on the Treasury Management Strategy 24-27. Report on page 27, recommendation 1, request that the Chief Executive takes a recorded vote.
And this includes the amendment as put forward to this regarding the CCTV. So, okay, so in terms of this, for, against or abstention, Councillor Ainsley.
4.
Akhtar.
Against.
Baker.
Against.
Bishop Firth.
4.
Blumenthal.
Against.
Bray.
4.
Burgess.
4.
Chadwick.
Against.
Conway.
4.
Cornish.
4.
Cowan. No. Croy. Cunningston.
Against.
Davis.
Against.
Dennis. Ferris.
4.
Bermager.
Against.
Fishwick.
4.
Glover.
4.
Gray.
4.
Hare.
4.
Harper.
Against.
Howe.
Against.
Johnson.
4.
Jones.
4.
Norman Jorgensen.
Against.
Pauline Jorgensen.
Against.
Kerr.
4.
Loys.
Against.
Malvern.
4.
Magetts Charles.
Against.
Rebecca Magetts.
Against.
Mather.
4.
Mickleborough.
4.
Montgomery.
4.
Monroe.
Against.
Neil.
4.
Newton.
4.
Pittock.
4.
Rance.
Against.
Rowland.
4.
Shenton.
4.
Imogen Shepherd Bay.
4.
Rochelle Shepherd Bay.
4.
Tony Skews.
4.
4.
4.
Wayne Smith.
Against.
Bill Soane.
Against.
Councillor Swaddle.
Against.
Wayhill.
4.
Eunice.
Against.
That motion is carried. I'd now like to move to the recommendations contained in the medium-term financial plan 24-27, which includes the revenue budget submission 24-25 on page 151. I request that the Chief Executive takes a recorded vote. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could we request that we have individual votes, please, for 1, 2 and 3? And obviously the a separate vote for the CCTV as well? Because that's part of the medium-term financial plan.
We'll do that. Can you just tell me?
Rebecca, can I just clarify that you want amendment 114.4?
That's correct.
the
Yes.
CCTV.
Yeah, we have recommendations of 1, 2, and 3. We'd like separate votes for 1, 2, and 3, and then there is obviously the vote for the CCTV.
Amendment.
Yeah, the amendment for the vote.
Yeah. So the amendments.
Madam Mayor, sorry if I can sort of help. The amendment that we put in renumbered them. So the first reference is now, so our amendment is now number 1.
Andy, can you speak up, please?
I certainly can. I thought I had the mic and I wouldn't need to. So the motion that we put in renumbered the existing references. So we originally had 1, 2, 3, 4. We asked that they be numbered 2, 3, 4. So we had 1, 2, 3. We asked they be numbered 2, 3, 4, and a new number 1 put in. That's what the amendment said.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, can we just be clear? Or can I just be clear? So the first vote is on item 1, which is about the CCTV. And the second vote is on former item 1, which is now item 2. The third vote is on former item, etc. Yeah.
Madam Mayor, I think we need some guidance. I find it very difficult to understand how we can have separate votes on 1, 2, and 3, given that they are the budget for this council, the revenue budget, and they are consequential upon each other. So we could end up in a nonsensical situation in which we have approved something without approving the actual budget that belongs with it. I don't have a problem with a separate vote on what has become the Labour's amendment, but I don't understand how we could vote on the other 3 items separately and end up with a nonsensical outcome.
Okay, thank you. Can you just wait a minute, please? Yeah.
Madam Mayor, may I just say something? We allowed a separate vote on 14.2 for one of the items there. So the same should be allowed this time.
Could I make another point? We allowed a separate vote.
Can you hold on just a minute,
Sorry.
please?
So
We're going to have one vote except for this one.
Pauline, if it's helpful, the separate vote we asked for was for a vote that was not linked to any of the financials. We checked on that before we asked the separate.
Just going to take the vote, sorry.
Going to take the vote separately. Okay.
The new one, do we?
Do you want to start with this one? So we're going to do CCTV first.
Okay, CCTV recommendation. 4 against or abstain. Councillor Ainsley, please.
4.
Akhtar.
4.
Baker.
Definitely 4.
Bishopworth. 4. Blumenthal. 4. Bray. 4. Burgess. 4. Chadwick. 4. Conway.
4.
Cornish.
4.
Cowan. No. Councillor Croy. 4. Cunnington.
4.
Davis.
4.
Ferris. 4. Berminger.
4.
Bishwick.
4.
Glover.
4.
Gray.
4.
Hare.
4.
Harper.
4.
Howe,
4.
Johnson,
4.
Jones,
4.
Jorgensen, Norman,
4.
Pauline Jorgensen,
4.
Kerr,
4.
Loys,
4.
Malvern,
4.
Charles Magetts,
4.
Rebecca Magetts,
4.
Mather,
4.
Micklebur,
4.
Montgomery,
4.
Monroe,
4.
Neil,
4.
Newton,
4.
Pittock,
4.
Rance,
4.
Rowland,
4.
Shenton,
4.
Shepherd Bay,
4.
Rochelle Shepherd Bay,
4.
Skews,
4.
Caroline Smith,
4.
Mike Smith,
4.
Wayne Smith,
4.
Soane,
4.
Swaddle,
4.
Wayhill,
4.
Eunice.
4.
That's carried. Thank you. Oh, these are 3 now. Which one?
Next is the medium-term financial plan as stated as recommendation 1 in the report and included in the budget submission. So for, against or abstention, Councillor Ainsley.
4.
Akhtar.
Against.
Baker.
Against.
Bishop Firth.
4.
Blumenthal.
Against.
Bray.
4.
Burgess.
4.
Chadwick.
Against.
Conway.
4.
Cornish.
4.
Croy.
4.
Cunnington.
Against.
Davis.
Against.
Ferris.
4.
Berminger.
Against.
Fishwick.
4.
Glover.
4.
Gray.
4.
Hare.
4.
Harper.
Against.
Howe.
Against.
Johnson.
4.
Jones.
4.
Norman Jorgensen.
Against.
Pauline Jorgensen.
Against.
Kerr.
4.
Loys.
Against.
4.
Magetts Charles.
Against.
Rebecca Magetts.
Against.
Adrian Mather.
4.
Micklebur.
4.
Montgomery.
4.
Monroe.
Against.
Neil.
4.
Newton.
4.
Pittock.
4.
Rance.
Against.
Rowland.
4.
Shenton.
4.
Imogen Shepherd Bay.
4.
Rochelle Shepherd Bay.
4.
Skews.
4.
Smith Caroline.
4.
Mike Smith.
4.
Wayne Smith.
Against.
That's a Soane.
Against.
Swaddle.
Against.
Wayhill.
4.
And Eunice.
Against.
That vote is carried.
We go to recommendation 2, as in the report, which is a statutory resolution for the council tax levels. For, against or abstention, Ainsley.
4.
Akhtar.
Abstain.
Baker.
Abstain.
Bishop Firth.
4.
Blumenthal.
Abstain.
Bray. 4. Burgess.
4.
Chadwick.
Abstain.
Conway.
4.
Cornish.
4.
Croy.
4.
Cunnington.
Abstain.
Davis.
Abstain.
Dennis. Ferris.
4.
Berminger.
Abstain.
Fishwick.
4.
Glover,
4,
Gray,
4.
Hare,
4.
Harper,
Abstain.
Howe,
Abstain.
Johnson,
4.
Jones,
4.
Norman Jorgensen,
Abstain.
Pauline Jorgensen,
Abstain.
Sarah Kerr,
4,
Lois,
Abstain.
Malvern,
4.
Margetts Charles,
Abstain.
Rebecca Margetts,
Abstain.
Adrian Mather,
4.
Micklebur,
4.
Montgomery,
4.
Monroe,
Abstain.
Neil,
4.
Newton,
4.
Pittock,
4.
Rance,
abstain.
Rowland,
4,
Shenton,
4,
Imogen Shepherd Bay,
4,
Rochelle Shepherd Bay,
4.
Skews,
4.
4,
Mike Smith,
4.
Wayne Smith,
Abstain.
Bill Soane,
Abstain.
Alison Swaddle,
abstain.
Wayhill,
4,
and Eunice.
abstain.
Carried.
That vote is carried.
And finally, as recommendation 3 in the report, which is about the precept. So 4 against or abstention. Ainsley,
4,
Akhtar,
4.
Baker,
4.
Bishop Firth,
4,
Blumenthal,
4,
Bray,
4,
Burgess,
4,
Chadwick,
4,
4,
Cornish,
4.
Croy,
4,
Cunnington,
4,
Davis,
4.
Dennis, Ferris,
4.
Berminger,
4.
Fishwick,
4,
Glover,
4,
Gray,
4.
Hare,
4.
Harper,
4.
Howe,
4.
Johnson,
4.
Jones,
4.
Norman Jorgensen,
4,
Pauline Jorgensen,
4,
Kerr,
4,
Lois,
4,
Morgan,
4.
Charles Margetts,
4.
Rebecca Margetts,
4,
Mather,
4.
Micklebur,
4.
Montgomery,
4.
Rowe,
4.
Neil,
4.
Newton,
4.
Pittock,
4.
Rance,
4,
Rowland,
4,
Shenton,
4,
Shepherd Bay, Imogen,
4,
Rochelle Shepherd Bay,
4.
Tony Skews,
4.
Caroline Smith,
4,
Mike Smith,
4.
Wayne Smith,
4.
Bill Soane,
4.
Alison Swaddle,
4,
Wayhill,
4,
Shahid Yunus.
That vote is carried. Thank you, members. The next item on the agenda is item 115, it's the council plan extension 24 to 25. We have 30 minutes on this item. Stephen, I understand that you're proposing it. Is that right?
that's correct, Madam Mayor.
Is there a... Thank you, Prue. Stephen, would you like to speak to the report? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I don't think I'll require 3 minutes. Councillors will be aware that we're working alongside our partners in the voluntary and charitable sector, business, faith groups, the Youth Council, the University of Reading, health providers and town and parish councils on a community vision, which will establish the priorities for the council's next strategic statement of intent, the council plan. As the current council plan expires this year, we need a transitional document to fill the gap until the work on the community vision is complete in 2025. Hence the request that council approves the council plan extension, or transitional plan. The document is based on the existing council plan and its aspirations, but with a few changes of emphasis to reflect current priorities. I hope all councillors will support it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Sorry, does any member wish to speak against the report?
Madam Mayor, I don't have very much that I want to say on the report, but we are planning to abstain, so we would like a vote on it.
Thank you, Andy.
I can do a nominal speech, but no one wants that.
That was a quick vote. Right, we now move to the vote on this item. All those in favour of the recommendations as set out in the report on page 295, raise your hands. All those against, raise your hand. Are there any abstentions? Thank you. That report is carried. Item 116 on the agenda. Again, Stephen, I understand that you're proposing that report. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Prue. Councillor Conway, would you like to speak? You have another 3 minutes.
Thank you. This time I might use it. I don't think so, but I might. I've reported to Council before on the work of the Berkshire leaders meetings and the decisions made by the leaders to progress towards a formally constituted Berkshire Prosperity Board. With the ending of the government support for the Local Economic Partnership, or LEP, the Berkshire leaders decided that to enable the 6 Berkshire councils to continue to benefit from the expertise of the LEP, we should set up a joint body that could commission the LEP to help with particular strategic objectives. The Berkshire Prosperity Board will enable the 6 Berkshire unitaries to have a stronger voice and to bid with a greater chance of success for significant external funding for key projects that affect all or many parts of the county. The likely rewards are great, while the cost of running the board and commissioning expert advice will be small and shared by all, and will be met largely from the reallocation of the government grant for the LEP to the 6 councils. For a small investment, in other words, we're likely to gain a very substantial return. I should add that the Prosperity Board will make decisions on the basis of unanimity, so no council has any reason to fear that its interests will be overridden by the others. The decision-making powers and the sovereign authority of each of the 6 unitaries will be unaffected. I should add that this is emphatically not a backdoor route to a mayor for Berkshire. None of the Berkshire unitaries supports such an outcome. We do all, however, recognise the benefits of working together to lever in funding that will help us all in difficult times. So I hope all councillors will support the establishment of the Berkshire Prosperity Board. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Stephen. Does any member wish to speak against the report? We now move to a vote on this item. All those in favour of the recommendation as set out on the report on page 325 and 326, please. Oh, that's carried. Right, we're moving on very quickly. Item 117. This is approval of a period of absence on the grounds of ill health for Councillor Cowan. Stephen, I understand once again that this is you.
I think it would be easier if I stayed standing, wouldn't it? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Sorry, Stephen, you need a seconder.
I have a seconder somewhere.
Yeah, Clive, thank you.
Clive. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council is asked to approve Gary Cowan's period of absence on the grounds of ill health. We all know Gary. as a long-serving and dedicated ward councillor whose health has deteriorated to the extent that he's unable to attend meetings in person. I'm sure all councillors will want to join me in wishing him well, and well, in the circumstances that apply in this particular case, approve the waiving of the requirement that councillors attend meetings at least once every 6 months. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Is there anyone that wishes to speak against the report? Thank you. We now move to a vote on this item. All those in favour of the recommendation as set out on report on page 335. Thank you very much. We could be over in the pub shortly. Item 118, the last item on our agenda tonight, is the redesignation of polling places, and it's Prue's turn this time. Is that right, Prue? And you need a seconder. It's not right. Oh, it's Imogen. Okay.
Me proposing, Imogen seconding.
Right. Thank you. Prue, would you like to speak now?
Yes, and I don't think I will take my whole 3 minutes either, Madam Mayor. It is slightly unfortunate that, having approved a revised list of polling places in January, we now find that 2 of them are unavailable for this May's elections, but it can't be helped. There isn't much we can do about it, because if they aren't available, they aren't available. There aren't a lot of suitable venues in the 2 affected areas, but officers have managed to find alternatives, having consulted ward members. No one objected to the change in Woodley. Some concerns were expressed about the Shinfield Players Theatre and the potential impact of additional traffic, and highways have been asked to think about mitigation measures. This is somewhere that is already an established polling station. As there is not much we can do about the unavailability of the polling places, and as we do need to have polling stations for the affected electors, I ask you to vote for the recommendations.
Thank you, Prue. Does any member wish to speak against the report? Thank you. We now move to a vote on this item. All those in favour of the recommendations? I think that's carried. Thank you very much. You realise we finished the meeting before 10 o'clock. Yeah. Thank you very much and good evening, members.